Hello, I'm Dr. Katherine Krefft, and this is the 10th and last in our series of videos on anxiety management during the time of COVID-19. If you learn these strategies now, then you will be able to continue to use them for the rest of your life to help yourself with anxiety and other difficult emotions. Let's review. In this series of videos, we've looked at several strategies to help ourselves manage our emotions, and specifically anxiety. We've learned how anger and grief, however, may indeed be used as fuel for anxiety. We've learned about diaphragmatic breathing, which is a critical technique to help ourselves to reoxygenate our bloodstream and calm ourselves down. Connecting with people in community, providing mutual aid to each other and support to each other is also a context that will help us in anxiety. Crying, a topic often totally ignored. I have never seen or read a stress management protocol that includes crying, and yet crying is natural and normal as long as we learn how to cry in a healthy way. We've also seen how learning to use self-talk, identifying the self-talk that is behind the emotions that we are feeling, and then transforming that self-talk into healthy self-talk is an absolutely key strategy in all emotion management. And we looked at some pointers for parents and teachers about how to raise emotionally open, emotionally intelligent children. And although these are techniques that parents and teachers may indeed use, it's also helpful for everybody to consider these so that we may consider what happened to me, what was my childhood like, what was my adolescence like, what was I taught about human emotions. As the last video in our series, I thought it would be helpful if we broaden out our perspective and not just consider individual, personal strategies, but look at a wider context. Why do we live in a culture that is so anxiety prone? Recently, I had the opportunity to speak with a 16-year-old, and the words that she spoke helped enormously, I believe, in helping to widen out our perspective from the level of one individual to the broader perspective. And here are some of the things she said. I asked her, what have you learned during this time of quarantine, of going to school without going to a school building? She answered readily, and she said, I've learned to live more simply. I've learned before the quarantine, I lost myself. Those are her exact words. I lost myself. I asked her to explain more, and she said, I was often overwhelmed, always taking everything very seriously, and angry for some reason. What might that reason be, I asked. And she answered, well, I had this one teacher who didn't listen to me. I'd be talking to this teacher, and this teacher would turn around and walk away from me. Let's look at these wonderful learnings that a 16-year-old was able to obtain in 2 months of quarantine and a different way of life. She concluded, I learned to control my emotions, especially anger. Wow, this is just fantastic. Think of it. In 2 months, turning around one's emotional self. If a 16-year-old can do it, we all can do it. Now, she spoke of losing control of emotions. Our young people speak this way because this is the way we speak to them. We talk about don't lose your temper, don't lose control. In truth, we don't lose control. We give it away. We don't lose control of our emotions. We don't embrace our emotions, take our emotions to heart as a serious subject to learn about, to understand, to honor, to grow, and to develop with and through those emotions. I much prefer the term direct your emotions. Control your emotions is often interpreted as meaning don't feel those emotions, and don't show those emotions. Well, adrenaline is adrenaline, and cortisol is cortisol, and once those hormones are released in your body, once you are, as people call it, upset, that is, you are emotional, well then you just are. And you cannot control adrenaline and cortisol by an act of will. Controlling is possible if you understand the word control here to mean directing your emotions. And the strategies that we have covered in these videotapes are very specific things that you can do to learn to direct your emotions. So let's widen out and see how our emotions and anxiety fit into a broader picture of who we are as human beings. We are physical, emotional, mental beings, and mental includes the higher mental. Now, in our look at strategies, we've looked at the physical level, things that you can actually do and do with your body to express emotion and help yourself embrace your emotions in a healthy manner. Like, for example, diaphragmatic breathing. That's a very physical process. Crying is a very physical process. Connecting with other people and forming community is very physical. It's physical in the sense that you can be friends in your head from now to forever with someone, but if you don't actually talk to them, if you don't actually do something with them, connect with them in some way, then really that friendship is just what we call fantasy. So there are very physical world, material world things that we can learn to do to help ourselves with our emotions. The next level is the mental level. This is the level of mind, and we have also looked at this level to help ourselves with our emotions. This is the level of thinking, self-talk, what we say to ourselves in our heads about ourselves and our world. This is the level that many people find the most helpful. To ferret out, figure out, what am I saying to myself in my head, which, when I say that to myself, I feel scared, I feel anxious. And then to purposely turn that around and embrace some new self-talk, to reframe what we had been saying and say something that is more emotionally honest and helps us to feel and in a healthy way express our emotion. So that's the physical and the mental level. We're skipping over the emotional level for the moment because that is what, in fact, we do. What most of us have learned to do, try to do. There's another level, the fourth level. The fourth level is named by many names. It is the higher mental level. It is the level that explores lofty thoughts and ideas. There are four aspects of the higher mental that I want to talk about. The first is beauty. Beauty includes art and music, which are fabulous vehicles for expressing emotion in a healthy way. Beauty includes all forms of arts and crafts and anything you do and make beautiful. So for example, gardening, even just simply arranging your house in a pleasing manner, all of that is beauty. Music too, in its wide range, expresses all our emotions. It's a wonderful vehicle to use with young people to help them to develop healthy emotionality. Beauty refines us, gives us a bigger perspective. So art and music do that for us and help us see ourselves in a broader, more expansive way. Another aspect of the higher mental is called truth. The exploration of truth is something we human beings have been doing from apparently time immemorial. Certainly the ancients did it. They gave us philosophy. They gave us many ways of understanding the world. Truth, yes, we have been asking for millennia. What is truth? What truths? How do I understand truths? But this very exploration is an expression of higher mind. Another critical aspect of higher mind is intuition. Intuition is that sudden flash of insight. Intuition is that elusive, unknown knowing. It's the, I don't know how I know this, but intuition is the flash of insight that one or more of our scientists will have to help us understand how to move away from and out of this pandemic. Facts are just facts until someone, in a brilliant flash of insight, puts them together in a totally new way. If by any chance any scientist or researcher is watching this, or you know one, the best way to access this facility that we have is to be scientific, collect all the facts you can, do all the work you can in the laboratory, push it to the nth degree that you can push it, to understand everything, to invent, to create whatever you need to develop your understanding, and then let it alone. Go for a walk in the woods. Go for a walk by the seashore or by the lake. Write your question, your key question down and put it under your pillow. Who knows? As you walk or as you dream, a flash of insight may come together for you, and you may understand the area that you're researching in a totally new and brilliant way. This is an aspect of higher mind that we greatly value. It is our minds that will get us out of this pandemic and move us ahead. So I skipped over the emotional level because, in fact, that is what we do in our culture. That is what we have been taught to do. And I think you can see this by simply really thinking about how we use each of these four levels: physical, emotional, mental, and the higher mental. There's another aspect of the higher mental, the spiritual, which I'll get to. But we skip over the emotional because this is something we have been taught to do. And that's the only reason. It's because we've been taught in our society, in our culture, how to do this. If I said to you, you have a great physique, you have a beautiful body or a handsome face, you dress so well, you're such a physical person, you would consider all that to be compliments. If I said to you, you are a great thinker, you're so smart, your ideas are so astute and keen, you would consider all of that to be a compliment. I'm just saying, you're a mental person. Your mentality, the way you think, is very nice. I like it. It's good. I agree with you. And on the fourth level, the highest level, the level of the rarest types of thoughts, if I said to you, you have an exquisite sense of beauty, a great grasp of truth, your science is so intuitive, and you're such a spiritual person, all of that you would accept as a compliment or a positive. Now imagine that I said to you, you're emotional. How do you feel? How do you react if somebody says to you, you're emotional? And especially if they phrase it, you're so emotional. Not a positive response, right? If I say you're so physical, if I say you're such a mental person, such a thinker, if I say you're so spiritual, you accept all of that as positives. So how come you're so emotional is not also a compliment? We're just simply naming a level of our humanity when we say that. Of course, we do know why it's not seen as a compliment. Somewhere along the line, and I believe it happened in the 20th century, we began to equate emotional with weakness. So you're emotional is interpreted as meaning you're weak. You're so emotional is interpreted as meaning you're very weak. But all we're saying when we say you're emotional is you're human. Now, how did this happen? How did we arrive at this kind of very negative definition of the word emotional? You can look back to the 19th century. Remember the books that your teachers had you read in school, Jane Austen and Charles Dickens, Mark Twain. You can look at this literature and you can see great human emotionality presented to you, and presented mostly in a very positive way. These authors, the great authors, were psychologists before there were psychologists in their understanding of human emotions. But we've moved far, far, far away from sense and sensibility. In the 20th century, the word emotion became interpreted so negatively that we even have a common phrase that is used repeatedly: negative emotions. We get stressed, we are taught, because of our negative emotions. Don't let your negative emotions get to you. Be specific. What are you talking about? What's negative? You'll find when you look more closely, these are the emotions of anger and fear, and sometimes sadness, that are underlying this understanding. But these emotions are simply part of who we are as human beings. So how can we call them negative? If we call these emotions negative, we are calling ourselves negative as human beings. I believe it's time for us to move away from this. How did we get into this? I'll leave that to the historians and the sociologists to examine in detail. But as I've looked at it so far, I believe we really began to get off track during World War II. So that was in the 1940s. Certain ideas were presented, and the populace embraced those ideas. Franklin Roosevelt, President of the United States, famously said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Over in Great Britain, the Brits put up posters that read, "Keep calm and carry on." Now, on the surface, those might seem to be truisms, but it appears to me that we interpret those words as meaning, don't be afraid, and if you are afraid, don't tell anyone, don't even tell yourself. And from there, we began to deny, repress, reject, displace, and in every way possible, bury that very painful emotion of fear. We did the same with anger, tried to. Since these emotions are just a natural part of being human, it's quite impossible to genuinely, totally deny them. AA has a wonderful saying. AA says, the emotion comes out sideways. When we deny it, when we reject it, when we displace it, the emotion comes out sideways. It does indeed. I think we would help ourselves much better if we transformed these sayings into something that more accurately reflects how we function as human beings. So, for example, could President Roosevelt speak to us today? I think he would say, the only fear we have to fear is the undisclosed fear, the hidden fear, the denied fear, the rejected fear, the displaced and projected fear. This, indeed, we have reason to be afraid of, because by doing all this, we transform simple fear into something that is much other than fear, as we'll see in a moment. And as far as keep calm and carry on, I think it would be much more honest, if you want to make a poster, to have the words say, "We're all afraid, do your duty anyway." That's certainly what the British poster meant, or wanted to mean, I believe. We're all afraid, but do your duty anyway. Now that is courage. There are many definitions of courage. Mine is, courage means being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. I believe today that both Roosevelt and Churchill would caution us and direct us to take a look at how our maladapted emotions impact our behavior in society. I have for you a panel that we'll put up that is from page 148 of my book, and it shows the cycle of how emotion gets transformed into behavior in society. So here we see that when we deny fear and anger, we displace it and project it outward. It becomes what we call prejudice, bigotry, and creates more emotion. This then moves forward in a never-ending cycle where emotion is denied, displaced, projected, becomes what we name prejudice, bigotry, which yields more emotion. Around and around we go. We change this in society by changing ourselves, changing our emotional selves from being a neglected part of ourselves to being an integrated part of ourselves. There's much talk in society about mental health. Mental, that word would seem to pertain to the mental level, to the thinking level, right? There's very little direct talk about emotional health. Emotional health means emotional intelligence. It means learning about our emotional selves and understanding and honoring our emotional selves with strategies, approaches, techniques, understandings that we can use and do use on a daily basis to help ourselves with our emotions. So that then there is no leftover anger or fear to project outward in bigotry or any other negative behavior. As we look at this wider perspective, we can also ask, what is our purpose? I've had this question from many people. I don't know why I'm here. What's my purpose in life? After seeing so many people for so many years, I'm convinced that those who are here on earth today have as one of their purposes the understanding and the healthy direction of human emotions. There are other purposes, of course, but our lack of understanding about our emotional selves and our failure to embrace emotional openness and behave in emotionally intelligent ways, that's epidemic. Learning and to accept and embrace our emotional selves is the work of a lifetime. And so I do believe it is one of the purposes, in and of itself, it is one of the purposes of why we're here in this time. We're here because, as my 16-year-old said, we lost ourselves. And please note that as she defined what losing self means, she went right into emotions. I was feeling overwhelmed. Overwhelmed means the presence of one or more emotion at a time. Intense emotion and more than one emotion. Usually fear and anger, sometimes sadness too. Strong emotions. And although she at first said that she was angry for some reason, seemed not to know what that reason was, she very quickly was able to identify that she was angry because of one particular teacher and the way she was treated. We can this quickly learn our emotions if we just give ourselves the chance to do so. In this sense, our purpose is to find ourselves, to find our emotional selves, so that we can be whole people, physical, emotional, mental, and higher mental, spiritual people. I am grateful to everyone who has told me about their emotions, because it is from hearing from people what their emotions are that I've come to these understandings about emotions for all of us. We are physical, emotional, mental, higher mental, spiritual people. And one miracle after another in my life, I have experienced the spiritual. And so I know heaven is with us, and your angels do bless you.